A silver-grey SUV pulled up by the palm-lined entrance of Pacific Haven Resort, and within a minute everything would change, not for the man stepping out, but for everyone who dared to misjudge him. The last light of sunset spread across the Santa Barbara coastline, casting a pale golden glow that shimmered on the hood, still coated with dust from a 6-hour drive. Marcus Reed turned off the engine, his hands still gripping the steering wheel, as if finishing a long battle. In the rearview mirror, his face appeared sun-tanned, angular, with deep, steady eyes, the kind of stillness only those who have heard real gunfire possess. From the back seat, Chloe, his 10-year-old daughter with soft brown curls, slept with her head resting against the window lips. Slightly parted her tablet, slipping from her lap, frozen on an image of a Disney princess in a flower garden. Marcus looked at her and smiled gently. 6 hours of driving from Los Angeles to this place, not for work, not for business, but for a promise he never broke. This year, Daddy will take you somewhere with a waterfall inside the house. He could have easily had his staff prepare a private suite at any hotel under the Reed Hospitality Group, where he was the largest shareholder. But he chose Pacific Haven, the newly renovated resort, and chose to arrive unannounced, no prior notice, no business card. He wanted to see whether the place he had poured millions into for its so-called human values truly understood those words. He pushed open the door. The late afternoon heat still rose from the asphalt, and the air was thick with the scent of sea salt, coconut, and pine resin. The waves in the distance sounded like the steady breathing of the ocean. Marcus rolled his shoulders, a faint crack coming from his back, a reminder of years in the military that never quite left him. "Time to wake up, princess," he said softly, tapping the steering wheel. Chloe rubbed her eyes, then giggled when she saw the glowing letters above the gate. Pacific Haven, where calm meets class. "Daddy is there. Really a waterfall inside?" "There is. And if you behave tonight, we'll go swimming before your early birthday cake." The girl cheered, clutching her pink backpack. Meanwhile, Marcus pulled the small suitcase, his worn sneakers making dry, hollow sounds on the stone path. He didn't look like the kind of man who usually walked into a place like this. No suit, no Swiss watch, no air of a businessman. Just a tired father looking for a place to rest. The lobby opened before them, like another world, golden light spilling over marble floors, the faint scent of bergamot in the air. At the center stood a glass waterfall, 4 stories tall, with clear water sliding over dark stone like a living ribbon. Chloe gasped, tilting her head back, eyes wide in wonder. "Daddy, look, it's just like in the picture." Marcus smiled. "I told you I'd make it happen." Behind the reception desk, 3 staff members stood by their computers. 2 of them, young and laughing, were scrolling on their phones. The third, Brooke Miller, mid-20s, red lipstick hair in a neat bun, dressed in a sand-colored suit, looked up as the father and daughter approached. She adjusted her smile, but her eyes quickly flicked over the worn shoes, the faded jeans, and stopped at the small suitcase. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you?" Her voice was sweet, but with distance. "Checking in. Marcus Reed. Reservation under Reed Hospitality Group, 5 nights." Brooke blinked her fingers, pausing above the keyboard. A beat of silence. "Do you have a confirmation code, sir?" "No need," Marcus replied calmly. It was booked directly through the company office. She typed, glanced at him, then exhaled quietly, as if this was taking too long. 15 seconds later, she looked up with a polite, cold smile. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked this week." Marcus frowned slightly. That's strange. I made the reservation a week ago. Sometimes the system double books, she replied briskly. I recommend trying the hotel across the street. They might still have vacancies. Her tone was firm, final, like closing a door. Then she turned to greet another couple, a man in a polo shirt and a woman with a designer handbag with a radiant smile. Marcus stood still. Not angry, just silent. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down, the sound of the waterfall, the rolling of luggage wheels, Chloe's soft sigh. He looked at his daughter. She held her backpack tighter, her eyes confused. Daddy, did they forget our room? Marcus knelt slightly, his voice calm and deep. No, sweetheart. They didn't forget. It's just some people don't look closely enough. Why, she asked, puzzled. He paused, then said quietly, because sometimes people see what they want to believe, not what's real. He led her to a seat near the waterfall. The droplets shimmered like broken glass under the lights. Chloe swung her legs, her small face turned toward the glow, her innocent eyes trying to understand why the strongest man she knew had suddenly fallen so quiet. Marcus watched the front desk. The elegant couple had just received their keys, smiling as they walked away. Brooke bowed, slightly unaware of the sharp gaze fixed on her. He said nothing more. But his expression changed. It was no longer the look of a weary father, but of a man who once commanded soldiers in the desert, who knew exactly when to strike and when to wait. A promise echoed in his mind, not to Chloe, but to himself the day he built his hotel empire. If I create a place for people to rest, it must also be a place where every person is treated with respect. Now, seeing how they judged him for his worn clothes and old shoes, he knew it was time to find out whether Pacific Haven truly lived up to its name, a haven. Marcus rose his hand, gently resting on his daughter's shoulder. In his deep brown eyes, a spark flickered not of anger, but resolve. He walked slowly toward the reception desk, where Brooke was still smiling at another guest, unaware that her own employer was approaching, and that every assumption she held was about to be shattered by two simple words. Check again. Chloe watched her father's back as he walked away, a strange feeling rising inside her. Not fear, not pride, but an instinct that something big was about to happen, and that this birthday night would be unlike any other in her life. The lobby of Pacific Haven still echoed with the soothing sound of cascading water. Yet within that calm rhythm, Marcus Reed felt a different kind of chill, not from the air conditioning, but from human eyes. He stood by the reception desk, his voice deep and steady, carrying a weight that made it impossible to ignore. "Excuse me, Miss Miller, could you check once more?" Brooke looked up, a faint trace of irritation flickering in her eyes. "I've already checked, sir. There's no name under Reed Hospitality Group. And as I mentioned, the hotel is fully booked this week." Marcus kept his polite smile, but his gaze slowly shifted from the computer screen to her face. For a moment, the entire space seemed to pause. "Are you sure you typed it correctly?" Brooke gave a thin smile. "I think I know how to do my job, sir." A soft sentence, yet sharp enough to sting with condescension. From across the lobby, Chloe still sat on the bench, her small legs swinging, her eyes fixed on her father in confusion. She couldn't understand why something as simple as checking into a room had turned into a silent standoff. Marcus took a slow breath. In the military, he had learned to steady his breathing before pulling a trigger. Now he was doing the same, not to attack, but to stay calm. "I don't need special treatment. I only need you to follow the proper procedure," he said evenly, his words precise. Type the company name again. Reed Hospitality Group. Check this week's booking records. The young woman blinked, then, instead of answering, leaned toward her co-worker and whispered something that drew a quiet laugh. Brooke shrugged and tapped a few keys. For a brief instant, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe recognition, but it lasted less than a second before she closed the window and turned back with an insincere smile. "I'm sorry, sir. Like I said, there's nothing." Marcus stood still, watching her for a long moment. His expression no longer carried the look of a weary traveler, but that of someone who had seen too much pretense. He nodded slightly and murmured, "I see." Then he turned away. Sitting back on the stone bench near the waterfall, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name, Jenna Morales. "Marcus, I just checked the system. Your booking is still active, room 7125 Nights Ocean View Suite. The system clearly says, booked directly through the Los Angeles office." "Is something wrong?" Marcus looked at the crowd passing through the lobby and answered his voice low. "There is, but not about the room. Do you want me to call the general manager?" He paused for a few seconds. "Not yet. Let's give them one more chance." When he hung up, Chloe looked up and asked softly, "Daddy, do we have a room yet?" Marcus smiled and placed his hand gently on her head. "Not yet, but soon. And you know, sweetheart, sometimes people need a second chance to show who they really are." He stood. This time his steps were slower, firmer, as if each one carried the weight of testing the integrity of the entire system. At the front desk, Brooke had just seen off another couple. The smile still lingered on her lips when Marcus's deep, commanding voice came from behind her. "Excuse me, I'm back," she startled, turning around. "You still haven't found a room I'd like you to check again. And this time, maybe let your colleague take a look as well." At that moment, a tall, lean man in a beige blazer, Tyler Grant, the assistant front office manager, walked over. He looked to be in his early 30s, composed, polite. "How can I help you, sir? I booked a room through Reed Hospitality Group, room 712. Tyler nodded and placed his hands on the keyboard. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Then he looked up, frowning slightly. "It's right here. Suite 712, 5 nights. My apologies, sir. The reservation is completely valid." In that instant, Brooke's expression froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Tyler glanced at her eyebrows, furrowing. "Brooke, he's right. This booking is confirmed." Marcus remained still. No smile, only a quiet question. "So the room is available?" "Yes, of course. I sincerely apologize for the confusion." The simple confirmation landed like a silent slap. Brooke lowered her head, her voice shrinking. "It must have been a system glitch." Marcus tilted his head, his eyes calm, not cold, but with the patience of someone who had heard every excuse imaginable. "The system doesn't choose people. Humans do." Tyler flushed with embarrassment. He quickly printed 2 key cards and handed them over. "Here are your keys, sir. Your room is ready. Would you like help with your luggage?" "No, thank you. I'd just like to speak with the assistant general manager." Tyler hesitated. "Miss Karen Holt, I'll check if she's available right away." Marcus nodded. "I can wait." He turned. Chloe ran up and grabbed his hand, her eyes bright with hope. "We got our room right, Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart." "Then can I go swimming tonight?" He smiled softly. "Yes, but Daddy still has something to take care of." They walked toward the elevator. Their footsteps echoed through the marble hall, leaving behind an uneasy silence at the front desk. When the elevator doors closed, Brooke remained standing, gripping the counter, her eyes avoiding everyone's gaze. She didn't know who that man was, only that his look left no room for excuses. Room 712 opened with the scent of sea breeze and warm oak. The sunset poured through the glass wall, bathing the space in a fiery golden glow. Chloe squealed, pointing out the window. "Daddy, look, the waterfall outside is even bigger than the one in the lobby." Marcus nodded, setting the suitcase down before sitting by the window. The ocean rippled softly in the distance, seagulls circling above, but peace eluded his mind. His phone buzzed again, a message from Jenna. "Just confirming your booking is fine." "Do you want me to call the regional director?" Marcus typed back. "No, but send me their number. I'll call later." He set the phone aside and looked toward his daughter, rummaging through her suitcase for her swimsuit. His eyes softened. Chloe looked up and asked Daddy, "Why didn't they want us here?" Marcus was silent for a few seconds. "Because some people think that if someone looks different or dresses differently, that person doesn't belong." The girl frowned. "But you said this hotel belongs to us." Marcus nodded. "It does. But sometimes you have to show the world who really owns the place." Outside, the sun kissed the horizon, turning the entire Pacific Haven into a blazing bronze. A soft breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of salt and the quiet chill of a fading day. Marcus stood, gazing out into the distance, his voice low but firm. "Tomorrow they'll learn a lesson." Chloe blinked. "What lesson, Daddy?" He placed a gentle hand on her head and smiled. "A lesson about respect, sweetheart, and about how silence can sometimes be the loudest voice of all." Outside, the waves continued to crash softly, but somewhere within that calm, a storm had already begun. Early the next morning, before the sun had a chance to break through the thin veil of mist over the ocean, Marcus Reed was already awake. He brewed himself a cup of strong black coffee, the familiar bitter taste that had once accompanied long nights on patrol. Steam rose from the ceramic cup, curling into the air and blending with the distant sound of waves, a kind of artificial quiet that only made his mind sharper. In front of him, Pacific Haven Resort still looked flawless. The pool curved like a silver ribbon, palm trees lined up in perfect order, everything so neat it felt almost cold. But Marcus knew the thing that needed rearranging was not in the scenery, it was in the people working below. He leaned against the balcony railing and breathed in the sea air. He thought, if I had not been here yesterday, then maybe dozens of other people would have to endure that kind of treatment every single day. A sense of responsibility rose in his chest, not just as an owner, but as a father, because Chloe was growing up in this world, a world where prejudice sometimes arrived faster than a greeting. The door to the room swung open. Chloe came running out, her hair still messy, a bright orange swimsuit in her hand. "Daddy, you are up so early. I am used to it." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "Do you want to go to breakfast? Will there be pancakes? There will, and extra syrup if you finish everything." Chloe's laughter lit up the room. For a few minutes, Marcus allowed himself to forget the previous night. But as soon as they stepped into the lobby, his expression changed. The hotel lobby was now busy, the roll of suitcase wheels on stone mixed with the voices of guests checking out. At the front desk, Brooke Miller was still there, her face more tense, her eyes deliberately avoiding Marcus as he and Chloe walked past. Marcus said nothing, only gave a slight nod, a polite greeting. She answered with a thin, awkward smile that looked as fragile as a thread. He continued walking his hand, resting gently on Chloe's shoulder, his voice even. "Come on, sweetheart. Today we are having breakfast at Seaside Cafe." The restaurant was just to the right of the lobby, glass doors open to the sea breeze. Morning light poured onto pale wooden tables, creating a feeling that was both elegant and welcoming. A bright, cheerful voice called out, "Good morning table for two." It was Jasmine Cole, the hostess, with box braids and a warm smile. From the very first glance, Marcus sensed something different about her energy. Nothing fake, nothing forced, just simple sincerity. "Yes, thank you," Marcus replied. Jasmine led them to a table by the window, with a full view of the beach. "I hope you and your daughter like this spot. The wind is a bit strong, but the view is perfect." "It really is perfect," Marcus nodded. "Thank you." Chloe pressed her face closer to the glass, excited. "Daddy, look, the seagulls are flying in circles." Marcus chuckled, then ordered their food. He chose an omelette and coffee, and Chloe ordered chocolate chip pancakes with lots of syrup. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Until from the next table came the voice of an older man. "Excuse me, could we move to another table? It is a bit noisy here." Marcus looked up. The speaker was Mr. Thompson, around 60, accompanied by his wife, who wore a white coat and a pearl necklace. Their eyes flicked briefly over Marcus and Chloe's table, long enough that the message was clear. The young server froze for a moment and glanced around. She knew that the only empty table left was near the entrance right next to Marcus. "Sir, there is a spot over there, but—" "No, we would like somewhere quiet." Mrs. Thompson cut in her voice, low but sharp. Marcus stayed silent. He had heard sentences like that thousands of times on the street, in restaurants, in places where people assumed that choosing where to sit also meant choosing who was worthy of sitting near them. He said nothing, merely placed a gentle hand on Chloe's shoulder, signaling her to keep eating. The server had no choice but to lead the couple away. For a few minutes, the air felt as heavy as fog. Chloe looked up, her innocent eyes searching his face. "Daddy, are they afraid of us?" Marcus smiled, his voice deep and unhurried. "No, sweetheart. They just have not learned to look beyond what they see." A few minutes later, Jasmine returned to their table. She set a small water carafe down, lowered her voice, and said, "I am sorry about what just happened. That couple, they are very difficult. But please do not let it bother you. We are truly happy to have you both here." Marcus looked at her clear appreciation in his eyes. "Thank you. I think the way you handled it was very professional." She gave a soft smile. "We are trying to make everyone feel welcome, not because of how they look, but because they are our guests." That simple sentence was enough to make Marcus nod to himself. A good seed, he thought. After breakfast, he and Chloe left the restaurant and returned to the lobby. Marcus bought another coffee and sat on a sofa near the waterfall. He pretended to scroll through his phone, but his eyes were quietly observing the front desk. Around half an hour later, a young black man in a black suit and grey tie walked in, pulling a suitcase and carrying an envelope. This was Andre Lewis. He moved with polite confidence as he approached the reception desk. "Good morning, I'm here to check in. My company, Northland Energy, booked a room under the corporate rate." Brooke looked up. Her eyes flickered. "I'm sorry, I do not see that company name in today's list. Are you sure I have the confirmation email right here? Maybe the system has not updated yet. You should try calling your company again." Her voice was even and mechanical, but the way she looked down at him, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the chill in her tone, made Andre understand instantly. He gave a dry smile, pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and turned away. Marcus watched everything. His hands rested on his knees, the joints of his fingers turning white as he fought down the anger. For a brief moment, his eyes seemed to change color, from calm to resolute, from resolute to razor-sharp. He stood up. Tyler. His voice carried just enough weight to be heard clearly across the desk. Tyler, who had been sorting paperwork, looked up. "Yes, sir. Please call Karen Holt for me. Tell her that Marcus Reed needs to see her." Tyler's eyes widened. Mr. Reed Brooks spun around her face, draining of color. She knew that name, the name she had seen flash across the system the night before, the name she had chosen to ignore. Marcus turned to Andre, his tone strangely calm. "Your reservation is correct, yes. Yes, I have the confirmation. Good. Within 5 minutes you will have your room key, and if anyone asks, just tell them the owner confirmed it." Andre stared at him. The owner, Yumin Darkses, simply smiled. "This Pacific Haven belongs to Reed Hospitality Group, and I am Marcus Reed." The atmosphere in the lobby changed instantly. It felt as though every other sound had been pulled away, leaving only the murmur of the waterfall. Brooke stepped back, her face ashen. Tyler dropped his pen and straightened up. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Sometimes the quiet of someone with real authority was the most unsettling sound of all. He looked at Brooke, his tone still low, but now carrying the weight of steel. "Yesterday you saw my name, and you chose to ignore it. Today you did the same thing to another man simply because he looks like me." He paused, each word falling heavily to the polished stone floor. "You did not make a system error. You made a human error." Brooke trembled, unable to respond. Marcus turned to Tyler. "I want to see Karen Holt as soon as she arrives." "Yes, sir." Tyler replied quickly, bowing his head. Marcus stepped back toward the seating area, where Chloe was still watching a video on her tablet. She looked up and asked softly, "Daddy, are we being turned away again?" Marcus smiled gently, his eyes softening. "No, sweetheart. Today I am not being turned away. Today I am just giving them a lesson." Outside, the waves crashed harder against the shore. Droplets of seawater splashed against the glass, reflecting his face. Calm, cold, but deep down carrying the steady peace of someone who knows he is doing the right thing. And somewhere inside him, an old belief stirred once more. Respect is not a favor granted to people with money. It is the only way to protect dignity for both the one who gives it and the one who receives it. The air inside Pacific Haven Resort's lobby was so heavy, it felt like you could hear people's hearts beating. After that brief introduction, silence fell, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Marcus Reed stood there, without raising his voice, without asserting authority, because the way he looked at people was enough to make them lower their eyes. Brooke was still frozen, her hands trembling over the keyboard, her throat tightening as she tried to find words. Every sound, the click of heels, the roll of luggage wheels, the steady rush of the waterfall, turned into background noise for the shame swallowing her whole. Marcus didn't look at her again. He turned to Tyler, his voice calm, almost cold. "I'll wait for Karen Holt in the executive lounge. When she arrives, send her in." "Yes, sir." He took Chloe's hand and led her away from the counter. The two of them walked through the lobby as if leaving the scene of a disaster. But instead of smoke or fire, what trailed behind them was silence mixed with fear. The kind born when someone realizes they have disrespected the wrong man. The executive lounge was on the second floor, a private area reserved for VIP guests. The room was wide and elegant, with glass walls looking out toward the ocean. Marcus chose a table by the window and quietly poured water for Chloe. "Daddy, is she going to get fired?" the little girl asked softly. Marcus set his glass down and looked at her. "I don't know. What matters more is whether she understands why she was wrong. Like when I break a cup and have to say, sorry." He smiled, almost like that, but harder, because what she broke wasn't a cup, it was someone's dignity. Chloe fell quiet, deep in thought. Outside, sunlight shimmered over the sea. Marcus glanced at his watch. It was almost 10 o'clock. He knew the meeting ahead would shape not just this hotel, but the entire chain. The door opened. Karen Holt entered, a woman around 50, short blonde hair, wearing a black blazer. Her face carried the tension of someone who knew she was about to face something far greater than a simple check-in mistake. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she said quietly. "I apologize for the delay. I just received word from the front desk." Marcus nodded. "That's fine. Please have a seat." Karen sat down, placing a folder on the table, her hands clasped together. "I heard there was some misunderstanding last night." "I am very sorry," Marcus interrupted her gently but firmly. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Ms. Holt. It was a choice." She swallowed hard and waited for him to continue. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice deep, every word deliberate. "I came here as a guest. No one knew who I was, and I wanted to keep it that way, to see how this place really operates. The result, as you know, is that I was denied a room, even though my own company owns this hotel." Karen lowered her head. "I have spoken to Brooke. I believe she behaved unprofessionally, and unprofessionally." Marcus gave a faint smile, but his eyes held no warmth. "If it were just unprofessional, I would have let it go. But she looked at me and decided I didn't belong here because of my clothes, my skin, or simply because I didn't fit her idea of what a wealthy guest should look like." Karen said nothing. She knew he was right. In the hospitality industry, bias was an unspoken truth no one dared admit. Marcus went on, his tone steady. "I built Pacific Haven not just to be beautiful, but to be different, a place where anyone, whether a corporate guest, a traveler, or a father with his child, would be welcomed the same way. Clearly that isn't happening yet." Karen looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and shame. "Mr. Reed, I truly apologize. I won't make excuses. I know this reflects poorly on management. I'll take care of Brooke immediately." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to see who understands the real issue, why something like this should never happen again." She nodded. "I understand. I'll arrange a full staff meeting." He raised a hand, stopping her. "Not a typical meeting where you just read the policy, Ms. Holt. I want them to face the truth. I want them to hear this story, not as gossip, but as a lesson, with names, with details. I want them to understand that every choice they make, who they smile at, who they greet, who they ignore, reflects the culture of this entire organization." His words cut through the bright morning light like a blade through silence. Karen looked up, her voice softening. "Mr. Reed, you do realize you could have everyone dismissed with a single call." "I know," he said quietly. "But I don't need heads to roll. I need minds to think." That sentence made her truly see the man before her, no longer just a powerful owner, but a former soldier who understood the meaning of discipline and values. Marcus stood, his tone now gentler. "I'll be staying here until Thursday. In that time, I want to see change, not in reports, but in your staff's eyes." Karen rose too and clasped his hand firmly. "I understand, and I promise we won't let you down. He nodded once, their handshake short but strong. When the door closed, Marcus looked out the window. Down below, Chloe was sitting by the koi pond, holding a cookie someone had given her. Sunlight touched her hair, turning it golden. He stepped into the hallway, wondering if a child growing up among buildings bearing the Reed name would ever understand that what made her father proud wasn't wealth, but how people were treated inside those buildings. The distant crash of waves carried the scent of salt. He closed his eyes for a moment. The memory of the previous night returned Chloe's innocent face, asking, why did they do that? And in that moment, he knew everything he did today wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching his daughter what self-respect truly means. Later that afternoon, Karen Holt left her office with a thick fold of determination in her eyes. In the internal system, a new announcement appeared with the title, Urgent Full Staff Meeting Analysis of Incident on November 10th, requested by Chairman Marcus Reed. Beneath it in bold letters a single note read, not just to apologize but to understand. Meanwhile, upstairs, Marcus sat on the balcony as the ocean breeze lifted his shirt. Chloe lay on a lounge chair, holding a travel magazine, her voice soft. Daddy, I think this place is beautiful, but I don't like how they looked at you. Marcus turned to her with a faint, wistful smile. Sometimes, sweetheart, you have to let people see you the wrong way, so they get the chance to look at themselves. You mean like they should say, sorry, not just say sorry. He set his eyes on the sea, but learn how not to make the same mistake again. A sudden gust of wind swept the magazine from Chloe's hands. Marcus stood, picked it up, and placed it gently back in her lap. The gesture was small, but his eyes were heavy with thought. The sky was turning amber, the sun sinking toward the horizon. And in that moment, the image of a man standing silently before the sea, a man who needed no business card to prove his power, became both calm and commanding. Tomorrow, every employee would know who he truly was. But tonight he was simply a father, teaching his daughter that true strength doesn't come from the power to punish, but from the grace to stay unchanged in a world full of judgment. The next morning, Pacific Haven Resort seemed to awaken in a different atmosphere. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the lobby, reflecting across the white stone floors in long ribbons of gold. But beneath that calm beauty, something was shifting. Change had begun quietly. Marcus Reed was up early. Standing on the balcony with a cup of hot coffee in his hand, he looked down at the pool below. The water was crystal blue, rippling gently in the sea breeze. Everything appeared perfect, unless you knew that just 24 hours earlier, in this very place, the man who owned it had been denied a room for the night. Inside the suite, Chloe was still asleep, her small face nestled against the blanket, breathing softly. Marcus looked at her and smiled. She might not remember what happened last night, but he wouldn't forget. Not out of anger, but because he had seen a small shadow inside the system he built. He picked up his phone. A message from his assistant, Jenna Morales, appeared on the screen. I've sent a summary of the incident to the regional director. They want you to present your account before taking official action. Marcus typed back briefly, I don't need official action. I need real change. He set the phone down and took a slow breath. Then, with the discipline of his military days, he folded the blanket neatly, opened the window, and let the ocean breeze rush in, a salty, vibrant reminder that the world outside kept moving even when people paused to reflect. By 8 o'clock, he and Chloe headed down for breakfast. Today she wore a yellow dress, her hair tied into 2 ponytails, white sneakers on her feet. Looking at her, Marcus felt something inside him ease. No matter how complicated the world became, he still had a reason to stay calm. As they passed through the lobby, eyes began to turn toward him, furtive glances, whispers caught between curiosity and fear. Marcus noticed immediately the news had spread. Tyler, the assistant front office manager, was the first to step forward. No longer tense like the day before, he greeted warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Reed. Did your daughter enjoy the pool yesterday?" Marcus nodded slightly. "Thank you, she loved it." Tyler smiled, visibly relieved, then stepped back. In his expression, Marcus saw something new. Not fear, but awareness. Behind the desk, Brooke Miller stood pale, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. She kept her head low, avoiding his gaze. No words were exchanged, but one small nod from Marcus was enough to remind her of the weight of consequence. Seaside Cafe was livelier that morning. The air carried the scent of fresh coffee and baked pastries, the soft clinking of cutlery echoing around the room. A familiar voice greeted them at the entrance. "Table for two." It was Jasmine Cole, the hostess, with the gentle smile. Her eyes brightened as she recognized them. "Back again, you two. You should try the waffles today. The chef just added them. They're amazing." Chloe clapped her hands excitedly. "Yes, please." Marcus nodded his thanks and followed her to a table by the window. This time the glances around them were different. No longer judgmental, but cautious, respectful, with a hint of shame. As they sat down, a soft voice spoke from behind. "Good morning, Mr. Reed." Marcus looked up. It was Karen Holt. Today she wore a white blouse and a navy blazer, her face calm but resolute. "I won't take much of your breakfast time," she said. "I just wanted you to know the staff meeting this morning is done." Marcus set down his cup. "Go on." "I gathered everyone," she said. "I told the full story without leaving out any detail. Some were embarrassed, others tried to blame it on misunderstanding. But I made it clear this wasn't a technical mistake. It was a matter of character and perception. And I emphasized that change isn't optional, it's mandatory." Marcus watched her, his gaze steady but approving. "You did well." "Thank you," she replied. After a brief pause, she added softly, "You could have made them afraid. You could have had people fired. But you didn't. And I think that's why they listened, really listened this morning." Marcus smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both calm and conviction. "If they only fear me, they'll change for my sake. I want them to change for theirs." Karen nodded slowly, then turned to leave. As she passed, Jasmine bowed her head slightly, a quiet gesture of respect. Breakfast passed peacefully. Chloe counted little birds perched outside the terrace, while Marcus sat still, sipping his coffee, watching people. He noticed small things: a server smiling at an elderly guest, a bellhop helping a woman with her bag. They might have been simple gestures, but to him they were signs of a culture beginning to heal. As they left the restaurant, Jasmine followed and said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you for speaking up. Not everyone would have." Marcus looked at her and smiled. "No need to thank me. Just keep doing what's right. That's the best kind of gratitude." She nodded, her eyes glimmering. By 11 o'clock, Marcus sat in a corner of the lobby laptop, open pretending to work. In truth, he was observing not as someone who had been judged, but as someone quietly testing the heartbeat of his organization. The revolving door turned slowly. A group of business travelers entered, suits, ties, expensive luggage. Behind the front desk, Brooke took a deep breath and straightened up. She knew Marcus was watching, but more importantly, she knew she was watching herself. "Welcome to Pacific Haven," she said, her voice slightly shaky but clear. "We have a reservation under Global Partners," one of the men said. Brooks smiled, bowing slightly. "Of course. Let me check that for you. Please give me a moment." Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, her eyes steady this time. After a few seconds, she looked up, her tone firm but polite. "Yes, I found it. 2 suites, 5 nights. Please sign here to confirm." Marcus gave a slight nod. No words were needed. He understood she was starting over. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip, Marcus and Chloe walked along the resort grounds. Golden light stretched across the pathways, the sound of waves gently breaking against the rocks. Chloe held his hand and spoke softly. "Daddy, everyone greeted us so differently today." Marcus smiled. "See, when one person changes, the whole place changes too." "You did that?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, sweetheart. They did. I just helped them see it." Chloe tilted her head, her lips curling into a small smile, the kind of smile that comes when a child learns her first lesson about dignity. They stopped by the pool, where the sunset turned the water bronze. Chloe tossed a small pebble into the surface, watching the ripples spread outward in perfect circles. Marcus watched, too thoughtful. Change, he realized, was just like that. One small act, one first ripple, and the rest would follow on their own. He squeezed his daughter's hand gently, his voice warm. "You see, sometimes, to teach people about respect, you don't have to shout. You just have to stand firm." Chloe looked up, her eyes glowing. "Like you?" Marcus smiled. "Like us." Over the horizon, the sun slowly sank into the ocean, leaving behind a glowing red streak across the sky, like the trace of a memory. A memory of a man who, without raising his voice, had reminded an entire company what dignity truly means through the quiet power of his own silence. Tuesday morning at Pacific Haven Resort began with a strange kind of silence. There were no more scattered laughs at the front desk, no more sharp echoes of high heels striking the stone floor. Everyone spoke softer, walked lighter, worked more quietly, as if they were afraid of waking something that was still smouldering in the walls, in the wind, in their own hearts. Marcus Reed noticed it the moment he stepped into the lobby. He did not need anyone to explain. He only had to feel the heartbeat of the place, and today Pacific Haven was beating differently. The sound of dismissal that once hung in the air had been replaced by a cautious awareness, a quiet self-examination. He walked over to the coffee counter. The barista, a young man named Leo, bowed politely and said, "Your cappuccino this morning, sir. I will add a little caramel just like yesterday." Marcus smiled. "Thank you. You have a good memory." Leo shook his head slightly. "I just want to do things right, sir." The simple words made Marcus pause. Do things right. Not brilliantly, not impressively, just right. He nodded, his eyes gentler now. "Keep that mind set, Leo." As he turned away with his cup, he saw Karen Holt in the distance. She was walking with a bald man in a grey suit, his stride quick and decisive. Marcus recognized him immediately. David Langford, the regional director of Reed Hospitality Group. So they have sent in reinforcements, he thought. David was the kind of man who carried 2 things inside him, the energy of a manager and the coldness of numbers. But when he saw Marcus, something in his expression softened. He walked over quickly and held out his hand. "Marcus, I flew down from San Francisco as soon as I got the report. I am glad you are still here." "I am staying until Thursday," Marcus replied as they shook hands, just in time to see if we actually learn anything. Karen stood beside them, clearly tense. David motioned for both of them to head into the executive lounge, the same room where the previous conversation had taken place. The air inside felt heavy. "I have read the incident report," David began. "To be honest, I am embarrassed. For something like this to happen in a property that carries our name." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his voice calm. "I do not want to hear apologies, David. I want to hear a plan." David nodded and opened a folder. Karen already held an all-staff meeting. She has also proposed rolling out an unseen bias training across the entire group. We can launch it within 2 weeks, Marcus cut in. "No, I do not want another training course. I want a real lesson." Karen and David looked at him. Marcus continued slowly but firmly. "A training course is easy. People listen, nod, sign the attendance sheet, then forget. But a real lesson, something that forces them to remember, is the only thing that will actually change this culture." He set his coffee cup down and lowered his voice. "I want to turn this incident into an official case study, with images, details, names. I want every staff member at Pacific Haven to sit down and revisit every moment where they saw wrong judged, wrong acted wrong, and I want them to say it out loud themselves, not me." David frowned. "Are you sure, Marcus? Some people will feel like they are being exposed." Marcus met his gaze. Better that than letting them keep judging others without knowing they are wrong. Silence followed until Karen spoke up. "I support Mr. Reed. It is time we stopped being afraid of the truth." David looked from one to the other, then exhaled. "All right. I will back you." That meeting took place that very afternoon in the ground floor conference room. 17 staff members attended. The atmosphere was thick. Everyone sat in silence as the projector hummed to life. Karen stood at the front, her voice steady and measured. "Today we are not here to listen to orders. We are here to listen to the truth." The door opened. Marcus Reed walked in, not in a suit, no collar buttoned tight, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his demeanor relaxed. Yet the moment he entered it felt as if all the air had been pulled from the room. He did not speak right away. Instead, he turned on the screen. A title appeared. "Case Study. Who has the right to belong here?" The words landed with a jolt. People glanced at one another, confused and uneasy. Marcus began to speak. He did not use the voice of a chairman, but the voice of a father. He talked about the long drive with his daughter, about the excitement in her smile when she first saw the waterfall, about the disappointment in her eyes when they were politely pushed toward another hotel. He did not just tell the story, he made them see it with every detail: the small suitcase, the worn shoes. Brooke's words, the silence behind the counter. No one dared lift their head. At the far end of the table, Brooke Miller sat with her hands clenched. When Marcus reached the moment where he stood at the desk, asking for his booking to be checked again, tears slipped down her face. "I know no one here woke up intending to do harm," Marcus said, his tone softening. "But it is exactly the things we do, without thinking, that draw the lines. Between customer and human being, between them and us. And if we cannot erase those lines, then Pacific Haven is nothing more than a beautiful building, not a place worth remembering." He paused and looked directly at them. "I do not need an apology. I need a commitment from each person in this room that no one will ever be made to feel like they do not belong here again. Not ever." Silence followed until a small voice broke it. It was Brooke. "Mr. Reed, I am sorry." Marcus nodded, his gaze softer. "Thank you. But do not apologize to me. Use that mistake to treat the next person better. She nodded quickly, tears dripping onto her papers. When the meeting ended, everyone left the room without a word. But something had shifted. The feeling was no longer fear, but thought. Karen stayed behind and let out a long breath. Mr. Reed, you just did what 10 training programs could not. Marcus smiled faintly. I only told the truth. The truth weighs more than any manual. That night, he and Chloe sat on the beach behind the resort. The waves rolled in steady rhythms, the sky was full of stars. She played in the sand, her tiny hands clutching seashells. Daddy, I think people look at you differently now, she said. Marcus gazed toward the horizon, where the sky had turned deep blue. Maybe. But what matters is that they will look at other people differently. She lifted her head, moonlight catching in her hair. I think Pacific Haven is finally really a haven now. Marcus smiled a rare smile, free of the weight of responsibility, filled instead with quiet belief. Yes, because now it belongs to everyone. The sea breeze picked up, lifting Chloe's hair. Marcus raised his hand to shield her face from the wind. In the sound of the waves in the distant city lights, he understood that this lesson was not just for Pacific Haven, it was for himself as well. Sometimes, to build an empire that lasts, you do not need more rules, you need more heart. He closed his eyes. The waves washed up on the shore, then pulled back again, like the way justice quietly finds its way back to where it belongs. 2 days after the meeting, Pacific Haven Resort felt completely different. It was not just in the way the staff smiled, but in their eyes that no longer avoided contact, but looked straight ahead, honest and willing to listen. That morning, the lobby was filled with the pleasant sounds of greetings. Guests were checking in and out, suitcases rolling smoothly across the marble floor. At the coffee corner, Leo was chatting cheerfully with a customer, while Tyler stood confidently behind the front desk, calm and steady. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew the owner was here. And instead of making them afraid, his presence made them want to do things right. Marcus Reed walked into the souvenir shop, hands in his pockets, eyes gentle but observant. Chloe was happily picking out gifts, holding up each item, a seashell keychain, a mug with the resort logo, then stopping in front of the shelf of stuffed animals. Daddy, this one is so cute, she said, holding up a small plush seal with round black eyes. Are you sure? I think you already have about 10 of those, he teased. But this one's different. It's the seal from the place where you taught me the lesson about respect, she replied, her tone so serious it made him laugh. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. All right, princess. $10. You decide. Chloe eagerly pulled a small bill from her wallet and skipped to the counter. While Marcus waited, a quiet voice spoke behind him. Mr. Reed. He turned around. Brooke Miller stood by the doorway, her hands clasped, eyes nervous. She wore a simple uniform, no bold lipstick, no trace of arrogance, only a bare, honest face, tired but sincere. May I speak with you for a minute? She asked softly. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. I wanted to apologize. Not the kind of apology people make after a meeting, but a real one. Marcus looked at her, his eyes calm but steady. I'm listening. Brooke swallowed hard, her hands tightening unconsciously. When you came that night, I looked at you and your daughter, and I judged. I saw the old shoes, the wrinkled shirt, the small suitcase, and in my mind I thought, this man probably can't afford to stay here. I didn't know who you were, but no matter who you were, I had no right to treat you that way. I didn't just break company rules, I broke something human." She lifted her gaze. Her eyes glistened, her voice trembling but clear. "I've thought a lot about it. I realized what I lost wasn't just my pride or my job. It was the chance to be a better person. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand now." The room fell silent. Outside, the distant waves murmured against the shore. Marcus didn't speak right away. He looked at the young woman before him, stripped of her false confidence, standing there with the raw honesty of someone brave enough to face their own mistake. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep, slow, and warm. "Brooke, I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to remember." She frowned, slightly surprised. "Remember what this feeling," he said quietly. "The feeling you have when you see someone hurt because of how you treated them. If you never forget, that you'll never repeat it." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from fear. "I promise." Marcus nodded, his tone softening. "Thank you for coming to say that. Most people go their whole lives without having the courage to do so." She pressed her lips together, nodded in gratitude, and turned to leave. At the door, she paused for a moment and looked back, her voice trembling. "That night I thought you didn't belong here. But it turns out I was the one who didn't deserve to be here." Marcus replied quietly. "No one is born deserving. We become deserving when we choose to change." The glass door closed gently behind her. In that moment, Marcus didn't see a fallen employee. He saw a person who had just found her way back to herself. Chloe ran up, holding out her stuffed seal proudly. "Daddy, I named it Haven, because it's from Pacific." "Haven," Marcus laughed. "That's a perfect name. It'll remind me of this place and of your lesson," she said. He bent down, smiling at her. In that moment, he felt something deeply right, not just about the hotel, but about himself. That afternoon, Marcus sat by the pool, his laptop open but untouched. Sunlight danced across the water, casting shimmering patterns on the glass walls. He watched people pass by, guests, sunbathing staff serving drinks, children laughing nearby. Pacific Haven was alive again. Karen Holt approached with 2 glasses of lemonade. "I thought you might need a break," she said. Marcus accepted one with a smile. "For the first time all week, I actually feel like I can rest." She sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. "You know, after the meeting, Brooke stayed late to clean the conference room. No one asked her to. She just said, 'I want to do something right at least once today.'" Marcus nodded slowly. "I believe she'll change. Sometimes the people who were wrong become the bravest ones to protect what's right." Karen looked at him, her voice quiet but full of emotion. "You didn't just fix a hotel, Marcus. You taught us how to be better people." He smiled, a soft but profound smile. "I only reminded everyone of what we once knew, then forgot that respect doesn't need a budget. It just needs a heart." That evening, the Santa Barbara sky turned shades of deep purple and pink. Marcus and Chloe sat hand in hand on the beach in front of the resort. The waves rolled in and broke softly into white foam at their knees. Chloe looked up. "Daddy, I think Haven is happy now." Marcus tilted his head. "Who my new seal, but also your hotel. It's happy now because everyone's being kinder." Marcus looked at her and smiled gently. "You know, when a place becomes better, it's not because it has more money. It's because it has more kindness." Chloe tilted her head, thinking. "So Pacific Haven is a place of kindness?" He nodded. "Yes. And so are you, sweetheart. You'll carry it with you wherever you go. The sea lay calm like silk. The breeze carried the scent of salt blending with Chloe's laughter. Marcus closed his eyes and listened to his heartbeat echoing with the rhythm of the waves. He knew his journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a man trying to fix his company. He felt like a father, rebuilding the world his daughter would one day inherit. The final morning at Pacific Haven Resort. The Santa Barbara Sea was calm in a way that felt almost sacred. No noise, no chaos, just small waves rolling in steady rhythm, like the deep breaths of someone who had finally found peace. Marcus Reed stood by the window, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the ocean stretch endlessly like a mirror. Down below, staff members were arranging the pool chairs, the bartender was wiping the counter, and a few early guests strolled through the garden. Everything moved with ease. No tension, no rush. He realized the most valuable thing he would leave behind wasn't a punishment or a meeting, but the way people had begun to work with a renewed sense of self-respect. A culture reborn not through rules but through conscience. The door opened. Chloe ran in her hair, messy, clutching her little stuffed seal. Daddy Haven wants to go for one last walk on the beach. Marcus smiled and set his cup down. Then I guess I have to go too. Haven shouldn't go alone. When they stepped onto the sand, the morning sun had risen warm and golden like honey. The sea glimmered in silver patches. Chloe ran ahead, her tiny feet leaving dotted footprints on the damp sand. Marcus followed, slowly, eyes on his daughter, but a mind drifting back in time. He remembered the early days of his career, signing contracts in noisy coffee shops, long nights, drafting expansion plans for his hotel chain. Back then, he believed a leader's strength came from controlling everything. But now, standing between the glowing sea and his daughter's laughter, he understood true strength is when you no longer need to control anyone, yet they still choose to do what's right. Footsteps approached from behind. Karen Holt was walking toward him, holding an envelope. "I suppose you're leaving soon," she said, her tone calm but tinged with regret. "This afternoon. I promised Chloe we'd visit the lobby waterfall one last time before we go. I'm sure she'll remember this place forever." She handed him the envelope. "I'd like you to read this before you leave." Marcus opened it. Inside was a printed document titled Service Culture Transformation, Report Pacific Haven. Below the title was a list of signatures from all staff members, along with a short pledge. "From today we serve not just guests, we serve people." When he finished reading, he folded the paper slowly, emotion flickering in his eyes. I've never seen a commitment statement more beautiful than this. "No one told them to write it," Karen said, her voice raspy. Brooke started it. She said, "If Mr. Reed doesn't need us to be perfect, the least we can be is honest." Marcus stood silent for a moment. "She's learning fast." Karen smiled softly. "We all are when someone gives us a chance to make things right." By noon, Marcus took Chloe for one last meal at Seaside Cafe. No reservation was needed. Jasmine spotted them from afar and beamed. "My favorite father and daughter Chloe, your special pancakes are ready." The whole restaurant laughed as Chloe cheered. There was no distance anymore, no barrier between boss and staff, only people sharing the simple joy of a sunny afternoon. Jasmine set the plate down in front of Chloe, then turned to Marcus with a small bow. "I just wanted to say thank you. Not because you're the owner, but because you made me believe that kindness can still change an entire place. Marcus smiled warmly. "You did that yourself, Jasmine. I just happened to witness it." She nodded and walked away. As her figure disappeared behind the counter, Marcus watched her with quiet pride. That was the real reward of leadership, seeing others grow better without being told to. By late afternoon, sunlight slanted through the palm trees. Marcus and Chloe returned to the lobby to the waterfall she loved so much. Water cascaded down smooth stone in layers glimmering like crystal. Chloe stood still, gazing up, her eyes wide. "Daddy, can I make a wish?" Marcus smiled. "Of course. But remember, wish for what you believe in, not just what you want." She closed her eyes, folded her hands, and whispered softly. "I wish everyone in the world will be treated with kindness." Marcus felt his chest tighten. A child in a noisy world had chosen something so simple. He gently brushed her hair and said, his voice low and full, "That's the most beautiful wish I've ever heard." Before leaving the resort, Marcus stopped by the office and left an envelope for Karen. Inside was a handwritten note. "Pacific Haven is not just a hotel. Keep it as a symbol, a place where everyone who walks in feels seen, respected, and that they belong." Beneath it was his signature. When the silver SUV pulled away from the gate, Tyler and Leo stood by the road waving goodbye. Brooke bowed deeply. No one spoke. Only the ocean breeze swept across the new signboard that now read, "Pacific Haven, where everyone belongs." Chloe turned in her seat, the stuffed seal in her hands, smiling brightly. "Daddy, they changed the slogan." Marcus glanced at her through the rearview mirror, eyes gleaming. "Yes. Now it's right." He pressed the accelerator, the car gliding smoothly along the coastal road, the sunset stretching ahead like a golden carpet. The wind poured in, carrying the scent of salt and the quiet hum of waves, a sound he knew he would always remember, the sound that reminded him that power doesn't come from shouting, but from knowing when to stay silent. That night in the empty conference room of Pacific Haven, the pledge sheet remained pinned to the wall. Under the warm light, the handwritten line seemed to breathe. "Respect is not a reward. It's a foundation." And from the next morning on, every staff member who walked through that door would read it, not because it was a rule, but because they believed it. On the highway, Marcus watched the ocean fade in the distance through the mirror. Chloe slept in the back seat, the stuffed seal Haven tucked in her small arms. He smiled softly and said almost to himself, "Sometimes to change the world all it takes is one small hotel and a heart big enough." The wind rushed through the window, the sound of the sea trailing behind the car. One journey had ended, but the lesson of respect and how one man's calm could change an entire system would keep spreading like the waves that never cease. A week after Marcus and Chloe left Pacific Haven, still gleamed as brightly as ever. But the most striking change wasn't in the lights, it was in the atmosphere. People began to smile more, greeting guests with genuine eyes, no longer following the lines of training scripts. They were no longer afraid of being watched, because now they understood that every right action was a way to protect their own dignity. A new sign had been placed in the lobby beneath the hotel's logo: "No discrimination, no assumptions, no judgment. Welcome everyone, with heart first, with procedure second." And below it, in small italicized letters, "Inspired by Marcus Reed." One afternoon, Brooke Miller stood behind the front desk, gazing through the clear glass window toward the ocean. For the first time in her years of work, she didn't feel like she was just doing her job, she was serving. A middle-aged couple, modestly dressed, approached. The man smiled kindly. "Hello. We booked over the phone, but we weren't sure if there was still a room available. Brooke looked at them and smiled softly. In that brief moment, the image of Marcus flashed through her mind, the man she had once looked down on, who ended up teaching her the deepest lesson of her life. She typed into the computer, then looked up, her voice warm and steady. "Yes, I see your booking. Pacific Haven is delighted to welcome you both." The woman smiled back and nodded in thanks. As they walked away, Brooke realized she was smiling too, the smile of someone who had truly changed. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Marcus was in a boardroom meeting with his executive team. On the large screen, Karen Holt was presenting her report. Guest satisfaction scores had increased by 43%, and employee morale had reached the highest level in company history. When she finished, the room went silent for a moment, before erupting in applause. David Langford turned to Marcus. "Marcus, you've turned a crisis into a nationwide training model. They're calling it the Haven lesson." Marcus simply smiled and shook his head. "I didn't teach anyone anything. I just reminded them that people will always matter more than systems." Later that evening, on his drive home, Marcus pulled over by the coast. Chloe sat in the back seat, playing with her stuffed seal, softly humming a tune. The sun was a glowing red sphere, sinking into the water, casting the last streaks of gold across the windshield. Marcus spoke quietly, almost to himself. "A hotel can change. A person can change. And if we have enough faith, maybe the world can too." The car rolled forward, disappearing into the sunset. On the roadside, a flag fluttered in the wind, and the newly gilded sign gleamed under the fading light. Pacific Haven, where respect begins. One autumn afternoon, Marcus Reed returned to Santa Barbara. This time there was no announcement, no long, exhausting drive or suitcase, heavy with responsibility. Just him in a simple shirt, and Chloe now taller, her hair longer, still holding tightly to her stuffed seal, named Haven. As the car turned into the familiar driveway, the sign for Pacific Haven Resort appeared, under the soft golden light. "Where respect begins," Chloe exclaimed. "Daddy, they still kept your saying." Marcus smiled faintly, his eyes deep, like the ocean breeze. "Not mine, sweetheart. It belongs to everyone who learned what respect means." The hotel lobby still echoed with the sound of the waterfall, but now the air carried a different energy, lighter, warmer, more genuine. Brooke was assisting an elderly couple at the front desk. When she saw Marcus, she froze for just a second, then smiled a confident, proud smile. There was no longer fear in her expression, only quiet gratitude. Jasmine hurried over her voice, bright and full of joy. "Mr. Reed, we still share your story in every training session for new staff," Marcus chuckled. "Just call me Marcus. I'm only a guest." Jasmine shook her head, eyes gleaming. "No, you're the reason this place became home for everyone." Later that afternoon, Marcus and Chloe sat on the balcony of the 3rd floor, gazing out at the ocean. The waves still rolled in, but now they sounded different to him, like the quiet whisper of awakened hearts. Chloe rested her head on her father's shoulder and said softly, "Daddy, I don't think Haven is just the name of a hotel." Marcus turned to her. "Then what is it?" She smiled. "It's the place where people learn to see each other with their hearts." He looked at her and nodded gently, his eyes glowing with tender faith. Outside, the sunset spread over Pacific Haven, not just over the stone walls and the surface of the sea, but over the people who had changed within it. And in that moment, Marcus Reed understood that the greatest legacy of a leader does not lie in the wealth he leaves behind, but in the way he inspires others to treat one another with kindness. From the perspective of an expert in leadership ethics and corporate culture, the journey of Marcus Reed at Pacific Haven is not merely a story of hidden power, but a testament to an enduring truth. Respect doesn't need to be declared aloud. It only needs to be practiced. He did not use authority to punish, but compassion to awaken awareness. And that is the true pinnacle of leadership. Because sometimes transforming a system doesn't begin with new rules, but with how one person chooses silence to listen and acts at the right moment. If you believe that dignity and respect remain the foundation of all lasting success, then like to share this message. Subscribe to continue following journeys where justice is told through kindness, and comment the phrase that represents your belief. Keep your dignity.